Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us on another episode of the Cultured Nerd Podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about the news from behind the scenes that the Scoopers are talking about, how the overall tone of Superman and the DCU as a whole will quite literally be the exact opposite of Man of Steel and the DCEU, aka the Snyderverse. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some updates to the Green Lantern casting, and then some of the details that they talked about that has been seemingly leaked on what is going on with this universe and what we can expect as fans going forward. So let's have a little fun with it and let's talk about some DC. And here we are.
It's official. It's going to be different, Taylor. We're doing something different.
It's funny because we've talked about this multiple times. I really liked Man of Steel. You did not like Man of Steel, but you actually came on board with the DC universe. What you saw the director's cut of BVS and onward. I always said that if you actually sat down and watched Man of Steel after you watched the director's cut, it made more sense contextually, but still.
It's the movie that starts the way one of the Star Wars movies starts. A man in a beard gets on top of a lizard, runs away from space soldiers to go save an infant.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I like where do you want to attack this from? Because the new information I'm excited about. But in terms of this, overall, I did like the darker kind of world that Zack Snyder was setting up.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, he paints with way too long of brushstrokes. And I think it took too long for that universe to say what it was trying to say. And
Yes.
in all of that time, it kind of lost its audience along the way.
It definitely did. It definitely did. And it wasn't to the fault of its own, but I think it was that people didn't see the payoff as it was coming. So they didn't give it the chance it needed. But then the studio didn't give it the chance it needed either, because they kind of screwed themselves over in that regard too.
It also feels like, especially with Henry Cavill, he was ready to do it all. And he just never was able to do it.
Right.
They never let him do with the character what he wanted to. Very funny, a lot like the Wolverine character that he then did a cameo in. Another character that people never felt like got to really unleash himself.
Definitely. And it's very interesting in that dynamic, but it's like, in hindsight, you can kind of argue that the biggest drawback to what happened with the DCEU was that it wasn't accepted by the general audience. And the general audience typically didn't care for the dark and brooding. It didn't care for the sort of the reflection on modern day world that it pointed at. Because
the movie hasn't. I mean, Happy Patriots Day to you, Taylor. It's 9/11. The movie has a 9/11 event. We watch it happen through the superhero lens. I mean, it's a pretty. And then we just watch people die everywhere.
Yeah. It was an interesting take on how to do a Superman project. And I think I remember when I first saw it, the movie itself, Man of Steel, was very polarizing because it had a lot of that straightforward reflection of the human condition. And then it was very much kind of like what the Marvel comics do, where not the MCU, because the MCU itself has kind of turned into an action comedy extravaganza, but the Marvel comics did the opposite of what DC did. DC made this idealistic world with these heroes, and these heroes were essentially like modern day mythology and Greek gods. And then Marvel decided that they were going to say, no, all of these heroes are in New York. Let's try to make them as human as possible. And that's actually what Zack Snyder did with the Snyderverse, was that he tried to make these heroes fit in the real world, not the fantastic world that the comics are known for.
It's interesting, though, as I reminisce about the past and how different. What year did Man of Steel come out?
2013.
What a crazy different world. In that I feel like they gave up on this movie very early on. When it released, it got discounted to like $5 within the first month. Like I remember it being very cheap at Target, like almost instantly coming out. Now, I bought it and I watched it and it brought me into it for that price point. But I feel like they didn't even have faith in it, even on that end. And it probably made Mac its money because of that. But we don't live in a world with those physical sales. And unfortunately, it just never found its audience in that way.
No, general audiences. I remember when I first saw it in theaters, and like I said, it was a very polarizing film. And the first thing that came out, as soon as we saw this film, my wife and I saw it. We saw like the 7:00 showing because they lined up like 7:00 is now the new midnight release because it lines up with the midnight release of the East Coast.
Taylor, huge tangent. That's got to be a millennial thing, right? Yeah. Like we're all 40 and we're like, fuck that noise. I'll show up at 7:00 and you can use my money.
So we saw the 7:00 showing, and it was the first showing. And then as we were leaving the theater, I remember hearing this lady telling her like she had her kids with her, and she was telling her friends, she's like, "Oh my God, I would if I knew Superman was going to kill the bad guy, I wouldn't have taken my kids to see it." And I remember that actually being something that really kind of caught me off guard, and it took a little while to think about that polarizing scene at the end of the film where he snaps General Zod's neck actually turned off a lot of family audiences because they didn't want to show Superman straight up murder the villain like that. Even though story-wise, it made perfect sense. It had context, it had purpose, and it taught the value of human life and how Superman did the hardest thing imaginable, and he even cried for it. Like, they showed why it was important and why it was bad for him to kill. Fans didn't care. Fans didn't care. General audiences didn't care.
General,
no. DC fans. You think DC fans were upset about it. Snyder fans who were embracing this, they became Snyder fans that day. They're like, "Oh, this is a different take," and that's where the Snyder fan tangent of the DC fan came from. That initial moment.
Yeah, it's wild to think about Superman. Superman has absolutely killed people. By accident, he wasn't fast enough. There was a dog that got hit by a laser beam. Like, I think that the fact that he made it a conscious choice is what people had a problem with.
Yes.
Because if he catches a bus, like, I guess we want to see him catch the bus and then the old lady falls out and he catches her too. But I was okay with that point. I have other problems with the beats of the movie.
Right. A lot of people had the issues with the Jonathan Kent death. They had issues with this and that. Like, there was all these issues, but it was very much what if Superman existed in 2013?
Right.
And how that would fit in that lens of society. Now cut to what we have now. And this all comes from various scoopers, primarily Daniel RPK. And I've actually heard these things too. So this is not news to me, and it shouldn't be news to anyone at this point. He said, I have heard that the new Superman movie is absolutely fantastic, and they're going all out. It is a complete shift to hardcore sci-fi and fantasy. It is set in a world very different from ours, very far removed from the DCU. Heroes have been around for ages, and we will see how it affected this world's history, technology, and how it shaped the world that we see here.
Great! Thank God. I don't want to be in this reality right now. Right. The world is on fire. Like, great. Give me a universe with magic where people are aware of it so we can see how it influences things. Which also to me speaks that whatever happens in these movies, we always need to take with a wink because you have forces that can change these things.
Right. So I read that and I was like, okay, well, first off, he is basically saying that James Gunn and every creative that is involved in the DCU are going to help mold this world. And like James Gunn said, that they spent months figuring out the setting for this world. So it's almost, to me, that first thought was that this is like Quentin Tarantino's alternate timeline, where thanks to Inglourious Bastards, they killed Hitler in the Opera House. The world is almost a hyper level of violence. And then you've also got like Kill Bill. You've got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where Sharon Tate didn't die. Like, you have all these things that changed in his alternate reality that is since the Tarantino world.
I wonder what's true in this reality. Was Bush still a president, or did we have a different president in the 2000s?
I mean, it could be like how Marvel was, where they had just like, they're like, nope, we're just not doing any of the modern presidents. We're just going to do, Reagan was the last president in history, and everyone else we made up along the way.
Sure. Yeah, like sure.
So it's very interesting. I mean, because even in the DC comics, they did canonize
Obama.
No, not that actually. I don't think he was actually canonized. They actually had Reagan as canon, and every president since has been a made up president.
Okay.
So that was actually how the comics did it. So it's very possible that they'll just do that. Like, let's not get into the messy minutia of modern day politics, and let's just say we made up some shit.
Listen, I again, it's interesting when you break down those movies and thinking about like, what if Batman and Superman were in real life? I wonder if like watching the Senate and the Senate process. I don't know if that's a movie. I mean, there are good Senate movies, but they're few and far between.
I don't know. I think Batman would be like, the system's broken. It's too complicated. Like, but on that same note,
is a movie where Superman shows up and then everything blows up?
Batman vs Superman, where he shows up for the Senate hearing and kills.
Yeah,
and, Lex Luthor kills the senator. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So, but even that movie was trying to basically say how the U.S. legal system was also really messy too.
Sure,
so that was part of the.
You know what I don't want in my movie? The legal system being messy and broken and corrupt. You know what I do want in my movie? Elves, magical people, space people, lasers.
So again, this new DCU is actually doing the best thing possible, and they are avoiding the modern lens, and they're giving people this new alternate reality where it's quite literally an escape. It is a history almost like Watchmen, where like, what if in Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan won Vietnam, and then the world went basically crazy because superheroes won Vietnam. So they're basically doing that same idea. Like, how much of history would truly be affected by if we added a superhero to this point in time? So you're probably going to see Metropolis, modern day Metropolis, have some really cool, weird shit technological advances because there was a superhero in the 80s and they studied him and they figured something out.
Yeah. Are we talking? So if that's the case, then we're probably talking like Back to the Future 2, right? Like there's going to be like kids are going to have like hoverboards and stuff like that.
Possibly. Or it's going to be like in the comics where Metropolis has this very bright and lit up and very unique look. And then Gotham is almost stuck in this like 16th century Gothic horror. Like you have these worlds that are built around this inalienable truth that super beings exist and they are affecting history.
But I was just thinking about what we were talking about, Gotham. Superman should be bright so that Batman can be dark. Right. And I think that you want that juxtaposition in the world. And if everything is...
Look, all I'll say is that if Andy Muschietti does his new Gotham and he has straight up Gotham PD blimps flying around in between the skyscrapers, I am going to lose my mind because that is the Gotham that I imagine. Giant gargoyles, 16th century style Gothic architecture, blimps with lights on them. Like
I do love a blimp. I don't think we see enough blimps in shows.
Yeah, and it just seems like it would be this cool thing that these really archaic old technology that we stopped using after the Hindenburg. And what if that's like the choice? Like in this universe, the Hindenburg never exploded, so they just didn't stop using blimps. So it's like
Rocketeer's got great blimp action.
It does. And that movie doesn't get enough praise. You and I watched that movie religiously as kids, and I still love that movie. It is like, to me, it's one of the last great adventure films.
Indiana Jones.
Mummy, and that was it.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Another good blimp movie.
For sure.
Taylor, what are all the blimp movies you can think of?
Rocketeer and Indiana Jones. Like that's really like that's it.
There's got to be a third one. Okay.
There's got to be more. There's got to be more. I think if anyone knows any, throw them in the comments because I'm going to start looking up for movies that have blimps in them.
Yeah, what are the blimp movies we're missing out on?
I know. Up. Like the whole.
I guess
had a blimp.
Listen, if we transition into airships, that's a whole. There's lots of airships out there.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at that one movie that Neil Gaiman, Stardust, with Robert De Niro had his little blimp.
For whatever reason, that movie escaped me. I love a bad fantasy movie. I feel like that's the only one I didn't watch.
Funny enough, it's actually not that bad. I watched it recently. I'm like, why did this fail? This is not bad. So it wasn't like the Mortal Engines, the one that Peter Jackson made, which was like, this could have been great if it was a TV show, but 2 hours is not the way to tell this story.
Sure.
But anyways, as we transition, another detail that came out of this is some context behind the Green Lantern project. And I'm actually we're going to talk about the Green Lantern casting after I talk about this. He said, regarding Green Lantern and aka Lanterns, I've heard they're eyeing Josh Brolin because their version of Hal Jordan is to have him as an older, gruff, no-nonsense mentor to a young and reckless Jon Stewart, which is what we talked about before. The series is set to start filming next year with a story that follows Hal and Jon as they investigate a twisted and bizarre murder mystery on Earth, uncovering a conspiracy that will impact the entire DC universe, according to the production grid. So that was actually what we talked about before. That lines up with everything that we've heard. So maybe he's just filling in the gaps, or maybe he's just saying exactly what everyone else is saying. But in the last few days, we've had our Green Lantern cast, the big five that were supposed to happen, and then the Hollywood Reporter and Boris Kitt came out and took out 2 of the names.
Pew pew.
So I'm going to say right off the bat, Ewan McGregor is not going to be.
Yeah, put an X over Ewan McGregor's face. What are we doing? What are we talking about?
He's not going to be Hal Jordan. So it's down to Chris Pine, Timothy Oliphant, and whatever name has not been revealed yet.
Now, tangent. Who would you want Ewan McGregor to be in this new DC universe? Could he play Constantine?
Yes.
Could he play? He could.
I mean, absolutely yes.
He'd be a good John Constantine if they did it like they've been doing in the animated movies.
Yeah, let him be dark. Let him have his accent. Make his hair just a little blonder than it currently is, and then you've got your comic accurate Constantine. That would be a lot of fun. I'd be down for that. But
I feel like with the Creature Commandos and all the other properties, I feel like Constantine is wave 2 of projects that have not been announced yet. He shows up in everything.
You know that like the Swamp Thing movie is going to have Constantine show up at the end and be like, hey, we got some weird stuff happening, and I might need your help in the future. And that's going to be like their Nick Fury moment with Constantine showing up to just talk to Swamp Thing.
He could show up in Creature Commandos. He could show up as, they go fight him and he bats them away. And he's like, hey, if you ever come for me again, I'm going to bring friends along with me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I think that's a little too soon to throw Constantine in the mix. But I mean, that show's only coming out in a couple months. So, I mean, that's very fast. It would be a cool surprise, though. I undoubtedly would be like, I would just be ecstatic to see Constantine, a comic accurate Constantine on film, because I loved the Keanu Reeves one. We saw that when we just had finished high school.
I also liked that one and was very tickled that he wanted to come back and play that character again. Is anything moved forward with that?
No, because they still haven't got a good script together. That thing is just sitting in a circle because they can't nail a good script, and the whole time while they're trying to nail the script, they're all doing other projects at the same time. So it's like James Gunn, Peter Safran, and all of them are like, yeah, we'll still talk about it when you give us a script worth talking about. And they're like, yeah, we'll get you a script, and nothing's happened yet.
I wonder if Keanu would come back so they could kill him and hand the mantle over to Ewan McGregor.
I don't know, but Keanu Reeves isn't as, I don't know, maybe not as physically poised as he was in 2005.
Oh no, for sure. It's crazy. He is. The John Wick movies are kind of like a better version of the Liam Neeson movies.
The Taken movies, yeah.
Yeah, like Liam Neeson is an old man in those movies, and they do a lot of body double stuff. The John Wick character they can do a lot with because that world is dark, and I think they hide it a little bit better, but I don't know if you can hide it as well here.
Yeah, I mean, so you see the first John Wick, Keanu Reeves looks like Keanu Reeves with long hair. Second John Wick, his chin is less defined. Third one, very much so. Fourth one, it's back to being defined. So I'm like, guys, he's gained some weight. I mean, you can see it in these movies in between takes. Like, I don't know, man. I can, especially when you watch the new Bill and Ted movie and you see him clean shaven. He does not look like 2005 Constantine anymore.
No.
He looks like 2005 Constantine plus 20 years. Like he looks. They say Keanu Reeves doesn't age. He is definitely aged. He just aged better than most people.
I also think that I'm okay if that's his one-off, and we then transfer into Ewan McGregor playing Constantine.
Yeah.
There's other names. There's probably other names, and there's probably other British actors I would probably get very excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I can just throw this out there right off the bat. The name that I would want to play Constantine, and who I think would be legitimately fun, is Charlie Hunnam.
Oh.
Like he is from Newcastle, United Kingdom. He is British. He is blonde. He's got that charm, that swagger, but he also has that sleaze factor to him a little bit. Like clean shaven, slick his hair back, give him the brown trench coat, and just say, be yourself, but with magic. That's Constantine still.
Who's the kid from, he's now an adult male and does adult male things. Who's the guy from the Kingsman movie?
Taron Egerton?
I think that guy. He's old enough. I think he's so talented. I would love to challenge him to see him play Constantine. I would love to watch him in a movie where
he would be a fun Constantine. He would be. I mean, a younger Constantine, but yeah, I mean, he's got that youth look to him. So it's like, this is Constantine. I mean, they could just hire both of them and say, this is Constantine in the 80s, this is Constantine today, and just call it good.
I watched that Tetris movie he did, and I was like, yeah, I'll watch him in anything.
Yeah, no, he's actually a fantastic actor, and if you listen to what they're saying, he's still got 2 more Kingsman movies in him, and they're going to be working on those soon. So I would like to see that thing come back. I like the Kingsman movies.
I do too. I think that they are a fun romp. I think that they do really great action set pieces. It's some of the best
fun action.
Yeah, and the way that they build movies around them. It's just different than like the Marvel stuff.
Yeah, I think it's because the director did music videos and has to time things by the second, and it just feels
so
really
good.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Matthew Vaughn needs to be involved in the DCU. I think he does 100%.
I also 100%. Bet that this Superman movie being the complete opposite means that it's kind of fun and funny, and the characters make jokes based on whom they are, not at Superman.
Yeah, I don't see Superman himself, like maybe he being a little cheesy and cracking some cheesy dad jokes because that's Superman in the comics. But I don't see Clark Kent being the funny character unless he's like stumbling and trying not to be noticed. But I see a lot of the humor coming from the supporting cast and that working for the story. I mean, not so much Lois, but Lombard, the sports guy. I mean, they got a guy from Saturday Night Live to play him. Like
the Green Lantern looks silly. That's a silly looking Green Lantern. That doesn't look like a badass Green Lantern. Timothy Oliphant is going to be he's going to be the badass one.
Yeah. So we're going to see some badass stuff. You're also going to see some, okay, this is ridiculous because why does Green Lantern have a bowl haircut? Like,
this idea that it's a different universe, I would love to have in this universe Tarantino directed E.T. Like all the Steven Spielberg movies, they flip-flop up.
Like, before we wrap on this one of the things that I think would be just absolutely fantastic is one of my favorite movies when we were kids was Last Action Hero. That movie flopped in the box office, but I love it to pieces. I bought it in 4K when they re-released it a couple years back. One of my favorite sequences in the entire movie is when they go to Blockbuster and he's trying to convince him that Arnold Schwarzenegger is him. And every movie that was played by Arnold is played by Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
And to me, that was one of the funniest fourth wall breaks that they could have ever done on film. But that's the kind of level of thinking that they're doing with this film. Like, you have whatever history is, we're going to change these details and cause this ripple effect. So, yes, this actor is clearly this character, so he can't be in this movie. So you can make references to like the Marvel movies, like the fact that Star Wars is so important to Peter Parker, but Mace Windu and Sam Jackson, Nick Fury look exactly the same. Like they have the perfect opportunity to make a joke out of that, and they still haven't done it.
Someone will be watching Firefly on a TV, and it'll be a different actor playing the captain.
It's played by Timothy Oliphant. Something ridiculous.
Sure. I mean, yeah, great. I hope they are playing 4K chess because the audience will be very appreciative of it.
Because one thing that the Snyder fans love to pieces was Zack Snyder's innate hardcore attention to detail and the
Sure.
ungodly amount of Easter eggs he put in these movies. If
Right.
James Gunn is doing the same thing, you'll have people that will just be watching these movies again and again to find these Easter eggs, and they're just a lot of fun when you find them.
Yep, for sure.
But again, bottom line, what they're saying on the street is that this movie, this universe, is going to be the exact opposite of the Man of Steel DC universe, because it is going to be an original from the ground up universe where superheroes always existed, they always affected history, and it's not going to be the lens of reality back on the audience. So to me, that sounds fantastic.
Super cool. I can't wait to see it in action.
I'm all for it, but I would like to know what everyone else thinks. But before we do that, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I head over to the Culture Nerd Patreon account if you want to help support us, help us keep the lights on. It's at patreon.com/theculturenerd. Anything helps. If you don't want to support there, you can always support us just by liking, comment, and subscribing. Again, I have been your host, Taylor Murphy. As always, Michael Santel, my co-host, is always here, always cracking jokes, always saying something inappropriate. And as per usual, he's been like this since we were 5. So after like 33 years, I've come to expect that he's not going to change. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Bye.